Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the money monsters for Enneagram Type Two, the bleeder and the bonder. And before we jump into that, if you still don't know your Enneagram type, you can follow this QR code or the link below on the screen to the IEQ9 Integrative Enneagram Test. If you follow these links, it's my unique code. I get a little kickback if you take the test through those links. So it's a great way to learn about your Enneagram type and support me and support this channel. So that's very much appreciated. And also my new book, Taming Your Money Monster, 9 Paths to Money Mastery with the Enneagram. It released Tuesday of this week. You can now get your copy from booksellers everywhere. Pick it up. And so let's jump into it. We've got, so the type 2, they're often called the helper. I call them the ambulance of egos because they're always running around helping people. They're very warm, generous, and kind individuals, but they're often playing a kind of a covert emotional game. They're playing sort of a give to get. What twos often do is they want to flatter other people, or they'll be very helpful. And because what they want is the flow of gratitude and appreciation that comes back from their generosity and their gifts. And it's not really... the generosity is good, but the problem is it has emotional strings attached. There's this sort of reciprocity that's expected. What twos often really want is to be validated first and foremost, and often to be taken care of themselves. And so they can create all kinds of financial problems and different types of codependencies if they're not careful. But on the surface, twos are very empathic. They're very warm. They're very generous. But let's talk first about the two different types of money monsters for the two. One this is what I call the attachment theory of money, which is based on the attachment theory of relationships, if you're familiar with that. If not, no worries. It says basically this, that when we have an unhealthy attachment to money, we can have two choices. We can either be anxiously attached to it, I mean, we're too greedy, too acquisitive, too obsessed about it, or we can be avoidant. We can push money away out of fear and insecurity. And so and those different money monsters, we call them the bleeder is the one who gives away too much of their money. They tend to be avoidant, or the bonder who's made money anxious. And you can be anxious or avoidant in different parts of your financial life. So there's what I call the 4 pillars of finance, which are earning, saving, investing, and giving. So earning, saving, investing, giving. Those are the 4 areas of your financial life that need your attention. And most of us tend to be a little bit jumbled. We might be anxious in one area of our finances and maybe avoidant in another. And we can mix and match these traits, as needed, depending on our personality type. But let's talk about the bleeder first. So the bleeder is a type 2 who basically bleeds out their time, their talent, and treasure helping other people but neglecting their own personal needs. And so they have a really hard time accumulating wealth or really taking care of their own financial future because they're so busy taking care of everybody else. And what they need to do is learn to set some healthy boundaries on their time and on their talent, on their treasure, to make sure that it's the oxygen mask principle, right? You got to put your own oxygen mask on first before you help others. And so I see a lot of twos, they get into this habit of it's like there's an old adage that it's better to teach a person to fish than to give them a fish every day. Well, a type 2, often what they want to do is they want to give someone a fish every single day with a side of tartar sauce and "you're an amazing" note, because they want that gratitude coming back at them all the time. But then they're depleting themselves of their resources in the process if they're not careful with that. And when we come to the 4 pillars of finance, earning, saving, investing, giving, twos are great at the giving part, but they can often have a hard time with the other 3. And so what it looks like with the bleeder, let me just run you through some of the traits of the bleeder so you can have a little sense of kind of how they operate. So I have some funny names for these traits. I call it, the first one is the love for sale syndrome. So they kind of treat others like emotional vending machines. They want to shove a 5-course meal in, or a nice gift, and trying to get a hug or get some praise and adulation back in return. And so what you want to do is, next time someone's asking you for help, maybe just offer to sit and listen with them over a cup of coffee that they pay for, rather than you having to be the one who rushes in and be the hero who's sort of white knighting people all the time in order to get this gratitude coming back at you. Because what you're really doing with the type 2 is your psychological, as we've covered in other videos, you have the psychological umbilical cord when you're a young child that was cut, that allows you to develop independence and self-awareness and self-consciousness. But it got cut by what I call externalized sadness. So you have this deep sadness about how you think others perceive you, which then creates your greatest fear of being unlovable, which is why you tend to be compulsively a little bit too helpful. And that leads into your greatest vice, which is actually pride. And it's a pride at what a great, generous, loving, kind, helpful, thoughtful person you are. And the way that manifests is really through your primary ego addiction, which is flattery. It's that compulsive need to white knight people or to give people compliments or, be the hero and rescue people or solve people's problems for them when, which is that's not bad on the surface, but the problem is that there's always strings attached with it too. It's not you learn as a child to be needed, that love for you is probably given out conditionally. You didn't have a really good sense of unconditional love, which every child should get from their caregivers. It was probably some form of conditional love based on how you performed or how you served the people around you, rather than, and maybe your own needs were neglected and you maybe feel ashamed about even having needs. And so you tend to neglect those, especially if you're the bleeder. And that's where a lot of your money monster problems are going to come from. So you've got this addiction to flattery, to helping other people out. And then what happens for the two is when you overdose on that flattery, or you don't get the reciprocity coming back that you think you deserve or were expecting, you can turn it into your secondary ego addiction, which is vengeance. You start to look a little bit more like a type 8. You're kind of like a teddy bear that suddenly grows claws and fangs, and it's this kind of a terrifying situation. But it's sort of the inverse of your normal way of behavior, because you're getting your needs met directly, maybe forcefully, but can sometimes cause a lot of suffering in the process for the people around you, and it can be very manipulative for some twos. Many twos, you'll see them; they'll send people on guilt trips, or you'll gossip behind people's backs, or you might fall ill suddenly. To become hypochondriacism is sometimes a problem with twos, because it's a great way to force other people to take care of you when you've stretched yourself too thin and haven't gotten back what you thought you were looking for. So you want to be careful of those things. But the traits of the bleeder, the first one, we have that love for sale syndrome, which we talked about. And then there's also self-neglect, sabotage. A lot of type 2s will just kind of magically make their financial needs disappear by not looking at them or even acknowledging them. And so you really need to maybe set up a me fund, so that that could be what we might call it an IRA, or a long-term savings plan for yourself, that you're making sure that you're taking care of your financial needs first, and you're not just sabotaging yourself by ignoring the problem in the first place. Another trait of a bleeder, and then again, you may not exhibit all of these or just sometimes pieces of these. And some of these traits, I'm sort of stretching them to cartoonish proportions for laughs and to make a point. So if all of this doesn't land, it's okay. Hopefully the concept hits home in a broad sense. Another trait of a bleeder, I call it endless enabling. And you can watch them sort of endlessly bail out their irresponsible friends or colleagues or family members. And they maybe need to work on their inner tough love guru and be able to learn to set healthy boundaries, which is what the two really needs to learn to do first and foremost, is how to say no, and how to tell the truth, right? And rather than just flattering people to in a manipulative sort of way, it's like, what do you really think and feel? Being able the honesty to tell people the truth about a situation, and that's going to be a really key point in you learning to tame your money monsters and become a money master. There's also altruism addiction. So some twos, they donate their last dollar to every cause that crosses their path. They're saving the world one bank overdraft fee at a time. They've got a heart of gold, but a pocket full of lint. So be careful about not overextending yourself with your altruism. And just be clear about, part of it is dialing into the numbers of your own financial plan, making sure that when you're giving, it's coming from a place of true generosity, not from emotional neediness. Another trait would be, I call it monetary muzzling. I mean, they may be suffering and struggling financially, but just don't want to look at the problem. They're sort of like quieter than a mime in a silent movie about their money issues, and have a hard time to tell the truth, preferring to suffer silently like a martyr. And, just need to practice a little bit more assertiveness. and being more direct and honest about your problems, most with yourself first and foremost, and then maybe get with a financial planner, a financial advisor, tax people, whatever you need to sort of get your house in order so that you really are taking care of yourself. There's also another trait I see a lot in type 2s. I call it the self-discounting dilemma, where they have a hard time charging appropriately for their fees and services, or asking for raises, or promoting themselves in a healthy way, so that they are, they're not discounting the value of what they have to offer the world because they feel guilty maybe about charging. They feel like somehow their help should be, I don't know, it's when the altruism by itself should be, altruism and poverty should go together somehow, or that because you're doing good in the world, you can't be doing well for yourself at the same time. So that can be a problem. Another real issue for type 2s is I call it retail therapy addiction. That when you've exhausted yourself so much in taking care of others' needs, it's tempting to pull out the credit cards and shop the blues away, or make yourself feel good by splurging on yourself when it may not be appropriate for your budget. So it's sort of a misguided form of pampering. They feel like I deserve this treat, I deserve this vacation, I deserve this day at the spa, I deserve the new whatever TV or computer, because look at all of the wonderful work I've done in the world. And the work you're doing is, I'm sure, wonderful, but if the money isn't in the bank account and it's not in your budget, just be forewarned about that. And another trait with the bleeder is, I call it the let go and let God delusion. I see this a lot in religious folks, especially people are in the nonprofit sector, like, okay, well, I'm doing good work, and so I'm helping all these people in the world. So I'm going to let go and let God take care of all these things. I'm going to trust that the universe is going to take care of these problems for me, because look at all the service I'm offering the world. And it's not really quite how the game works, I'm afraid. God's not going to work a miracle to solve a problem that you have the power to fix. It's a co-creation process here. So just be mindful that you aren't trusting in the universe a little too much, that somehow it's all going to work out in the end, because sometimes it doesn't. All right, now we've got on the flip side from the bleeder, we've got what I call the bonder. And the bonder is a tricky one, because it's someone who's money anxious or has a lot of wealth. They've really got the earning and saving and investing part down. But what happens is they tend to, and I've seen some of the worst abuse in my life coming from type 2s, who will use their wealth to create a kind of indentured servitude in other people. They'll give generously on the front end of the relationship, but then it's sort of like a trap. That's like they've created an emotional and or financial codependency in another person to keep them sort of trapped in their orbit and keep a steady flow of gratitude coming back their way when both people are probably better off apart. And what can happen is the two can justify some really horrible behavior. It's like, in their minds, it's like, well, after everything I've done for you, I deserve something back. Like I deserve, it could be, and it can get weird. Things can get quite ugly at that point. And so there's a sort of that anger or vengeance comes out, and it's like now they feel entitled to take advantage of this other person in ways that can be very unhealthy if they're not careful. So here's a couple traits, of the bonder. They're sort of varied. First one, I call it the cash stash syndrome. These folks, they'll work overtime to make money, but they want to hug their wallet tight because they're so concerned about having enough money to buy the love of the people that they're closest to, for their kids, their family members, or whatever. So they might be very generous in one part of their might be a bleeder in one area, but then they're just completely, there's this walls go up in other areas because they're afraid they're going to run out of money in order to, they won't be able to play the financial codependency game that they've been playing with these people in their lives. There's also what I call the "where is my parade" disorder. It's this, again, it's sort of a sense of entitlement that the bonder has. It's like, hey kid, I gave you this great Christmas present, now love me forever. That there's something it's always the strings that are attached to the gifts that cause the problem in the mind of the two and in their relationship, rather than giving in the money master two, which we'll talk about later, embodies selfless love and gives unconditionally. The healthy type 2 is one who cuts the strings of codependency or cuts the strings of even reciprocity, of needing to be acknowledged for their work. They're doing it because it's a good thing to do, and they don't really care if anybody pats them on the head because they've got that inner sense of self-worth figured out. They've learned to love themselves first unconditionally, and then they can give unconditionally rather than the conditional kind of stuff, games that they're often playing. Then there's the I want to be Mr. Beast complex. The type of 2s who just can't. They want to show off their wealth, and they want to like everyone to see how generous they are and how much altruism they're putting out in the world. And so they're still looking for that pat in the head. They're looking for that gold star. They're looking for the praise from teacher and from the people around them, and it can get quite problematic. Rather than giving anonymously or just without, it's you need to be able to learn how to give without getting anything back. That's the real crux for the type 2 to learn. And then there's what I call the self-flagellation fixation. Some 2s will undergo a great deal of financial hardship for themselves in order to sort of martyr themselves to help other people in their lives, so they can play the martyr. That's a role 2s often take on in various forms of, look how much I've done for you. Look at, it's sort of a stereotype, I admit, but sometimes it applies. It's sort of the stereotype of the Jewish grandmother who says like, oy vey, look all the things I've done for you and what you can't come to my birthday party. It's that sense of always, I've given you something, now you got to give back. I'm entitled to something back in return. And so those are some of the quick traits for the bleeder and the bonder. But if you want to really figure out how to become a money master too, go into great detail in my new book, Taming Your Money Monster. Check it out. It's getting great reviews. I think you're going to love it. And if you do get the book, you do me a huge favor and post some reviews on Amazon or Goodreads or anywhere where you can. That would be a huge favor for me. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks, gang. Be well.